What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, former world champion, well-renowned former trainer of the year, Mexican star boxer and star trainer in Robert Garcia. Robert Garcia was a former world champion himself. Robert Garcia trains world champions. Most noted, he trains his brother, his little brother, and 4-division world champion, Mexican superstar boxer, Mikey Garcia. With that said, Robert Garcia, he weighed in and gave his thoughts on 4-division world champion, Mexican superstar boxer, who currently is the undisputed super middleweight world champion, widely considered by many to be the face of the sport of boxing, top 5 pound-for-pound best fighters in the world, in Saul Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez, 57 wins, 2 losses, 2 draws, 39 big wins by way of knockout. He is 32 years of age, 5'8" with a 70-inch arm reach. With that said, Canelo Alvarez is headed into his highly anticipated, as it get closer, trilogy showdown with 2-time unified middleweight world champion, superstar boxer Gennady Triple G Golovkin, this upcoming Saturday, September 17th. Okay, and in the press conference and media workout, Canelo Alvarez was asked about future fights should he be victorious against Gennady Golovkin, right? And those 2 fighters that was obviously named was undefeated 2-time WBC super middleweight world champion, Mexican Ecuadorian superstar boxer David Benavidez, and former world champion, super middleweight world champion, undefeated Mexican superstar boxer Gilberto Ramirez, Zordo Ramirez, who now fights at light heavyweight and is going to fight the last guy that Canelo just lost to in undefeated WBA light heavyweight world champion, Russian superstar boxer Dmitry Bivol. Okay, Zordo Ramirez and Dmitry Bivol are getting ready to fight. Dmitry Bivol just beat Canelo Alvarez handily, pretty easily, okay? And that was his second official loss. Now, he had 2 questionable fights, first fights with Triple G, but those are his 2 losses. We know he lost to legendary retired Hall of Fame iconic superstar boxer Floyd Mayweather, which he lost every round, and he lost all but 3 rounds to Dmitry Bivol, if that, right? So he was asked about Zordo fighting Bivol. Now, Bivol beat Canelo, but Zordo had been calling out Canelo for a very long time. David Benavidez has been calling out Canelo for a very long time, and he has not acknowledged fighting either one of those guys. So he was asked about fighting a winner, and he said that if Dmitry Bivol loses, he don't want to fight him, and he don't want to fight Zordo Ramirez or David Benavidez because he no longer wants to fight Mexican fighters, right? He's a Mexican fighter himself. He represents Mexico, and he has no interest in fighting any more Mexican fighters. So he'll never fight Zordo Ramirez or David Benavidez, which is astronomical to say the least, because imagine if African-American athletes in the sport of boxing said that, you know, they were not going to fight any more African-American fighters, right? Imagine Terrence Crawford saying, I'm not going to fight against Errol Spence, which is the biggest fight in boxing, because Errol Spence is African-American. Imagine vice versa, or imagine Devin Haney and Gervonta Tank Davis saying they're never going to fight each other, or Shakur Stevenson, but they're willing to fight Ryan Garcia, right? That wouldn't go over well, would it? No. So with that said, Canelo Alvarez made these statements, and it didn't go as viral as it should, because it's irresponsible to the fans in the sport of boxing, but nonetheless, he gets a pass because he's the quote-unquote darling in the sport of boxing. He's the face of the sport of boxing, right? And so he gets a pass. So with that said, right, Robert Garcia, that leads me to my point, Robert Garcia was asked about Canelo Alvarez in these comments, to which Robert Garcia states that it's okay, because we should see Canelo Alvarez versus African-American fighters, the black boxers, and European fighters, and Caucasian fighters. Nobody wants to see Canelo Alvarez against other Mexican fighters. Huh? So you giving Canelo some of the greatest fights in the history of the sport of boxing are Mexican on Mexican fights. Those are some of the biggest fights in the history of the sport of boxing. And Robert Garcia says it's okay, and you want to see Canelo Alvarez versus black fighters anyway because that's a natural rivalry, which it is. So Robert Garcia had did 2 interviews, right? In which one interview, Robert Garcia, he stated that coming up as a youngin and as a boxer, you know, it's always been a rivalry between blacks and Mexican fighters. And, you know, that was always the focal point. But yet people will tell you there's no such thing as race in the sport of boxing. There's no such thing as race in the sport of boxing. Yet Robert Garcia is telling you that we should want to see Canelo Alvarez face off against the black fighters, essentially, and beat the black fighters, African American fighters and the European fighters, and don't be concerned, no longer concerned with Canelo Alvarez fighting Mexican fighters. Now, again, like I said, you got legends more recently, right? You have Eric Morales, Marco Antonio Barrera, Juan Manuel Marquez. 4 Hall of Fame iconic Mexican legends in the sport of boxing that faced off against each other. Now, we never got Marquez and Morales. I always wanted to see that. But we got Marquez and Barrera, and we got obviously Barrera and Morales, who fight 3 times, 2 or 3 times, right? Legendary fights. And yet, he's saying it's okay. Now, everybody has their opinion in the sport of boxing, but it just goes to show the irresponsibility in the sport of boxing, right? And it just goes to show the division in the sport of boxing. When people try to claim, oh yeah, there's no such thing as race in the sport of boxing. Oh yes, it is. For sure, it's a such thing as race in the sport of boxing. You understand? And again, like I stated, it's just irresponsible on the part of fighters to say, I'm not going to fight this fighter, when you're doing the fans a disservice. And the fans are the ones that fit the bill for fighters like Canelo Alvarez to walk around with Dolce & Gabbana pajamas on at press conferences and weigh-ins. It's the fans that are able to, you know, spend their hard-earned money to support Canelo Alvarez. So they want to see the best fighting the best. They don't want to hear about any division within the sport, especially when you have David Benavidez and Zordo Ramirez calling for a fight with Canelo Alvarez aggressively. You got David Benavidez's father, Jose Benavidez Sr., calling out Canelo Alvarez and saying he gonna buy Canelo Alvarez a chain with balls on it because Canelo Alvarez don't have them. You got Zordo Ramirez saying, listen, if the problem is that I'm Mexican, well, I'm an official U.S. citizen, so it shouldn't matter. I'm no longer Mexican. I'm officially a U.S. citizen. This was Zordo Ramirez said. That's how aggressively they're pursuing the fight with Canelo Alvarez. And yet Canelo Alvarez is talking about he don't want to fight other Mexican fighters. And you have people giving him a pass. Right? You just had another Mexican legend and Vargas, right? Vargas just came out. He stated that that's the silliest thing he's ever heard. And for one, if you represent the Mexican culture, like Canelo Alvarez is saying, I represent the Mexican culture, so I don't want to, go against it. Well, if you represent the Mexican culture, why wouldn't you want to put food on your table, seeing as though you are considered the face of the sport of boxing? You are the cash cow. So fighting Canelo Alvarez essentially is hitting the jackpot, hitting the lottery. So why wouldn't Canelo Alvarez want to break bread with the other Mexican fighters? Help them put food on the table, help them feed their family, and help them support the community. You fighting them gives them money to be able to go back to Mexico and support the community. So why wouldn't you want to help them in that way? Since you support your Mexican fighters, you should want to compete against them, give them a payday, and help them be able to feed their family. But more importantly, help them help the culture, right? That just makes sense. It don't make sense that he's saying that he don't want to fight Mexican fighters when he fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. is considered the greatest Mexican fighter in the history of the sport of boxing. You fought his son. Ain't had no problem doing it. Regardless if it was a rivalry, if it was personal, anything. You did it. You fought against his son. You had no problem doing it. So what happened is that Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. doesn't represent the same threat that that Zoto Ramirez and David Benavidez represents. Point blank and period. That's just the bottom line. And that's all I got for y'all. Make sure you hit the like button, drop a comment in the comment section, let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue, Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notifications. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to Black Media Roll. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for you. Peace.